Hello everyone, Memory here. Oldita region has officially released in NA, and so does the new nodes and workers. This video will primarily be talking about Aldraxia workers and nodes. My previous node tier video was well received, and I'm glad that I did help a lot of you guys. So here I decided to make another video that talks about the new nodes in Oldita. I will also be listing a few nodes that have become less valuable, and hence you can take the CP from those nodes to invest in Oldita, if you do decide to take some of the new nodes after watching this video. At the end of the video, I'll also be talking about how I got my 7 Artisan workers in Oldita within a week. As per usual, I roughly organized these nodes into T1 to T4 nodes based on my testing and experience in the node. T1 is a must-have and T4 is trash, so let's begin. First of all, there are no T1 nodes in this region. I know it's a bummer, and I really don't want this to be the case as well, since I really like the overall design of this region. So let's start with the 2 excavation nodes. We have the Trace of Violence node, which usually will be a T1 node just because of the extreme limited supply. But after some testing, it doesn't have a higher production rate compared to other excavation nodes. It doesn't have other miscellaneous drop that can be vended for extra silver, and it costs a bit too much to link to. So for now, I'm putting it at T2. The other excavation node is the Mass of Pure Magic node with Trace of Battle. And just like the first Mass of Pure Magic node in Grana, it is another 10+ hour node. Now I've ranked the Starzan node as T1, but this one here is a tier worse on every aspect compared to the Starzan one. It costs twice as much as Starzan, it only has 1 trace, the Trace of Battle, which is not selling at max price. Whereas the Starzan has 2 traces that always sells at max price. On top of that, Starzan is a popular grinding spot for most people, but this Crypt of Resting Thoughts node is a 310 AP zone, which I think most of the people wouldn't be able to grind here. So I'd put this node at low T2, maybe a T3, depending on if you need the Mass of Pure Magic or not. Next up, we have the new Thornwood Timber nodes. The sap is looking to be very valuable in the future because it is required for many new elixirs and furnitures. I'm not too sure on the timber yet, but it is currently rising in price, probably because not many people are producing them yet. There are 2 Thornwood Timber nodes. One is the Shiv Valley and the other is the Thornwood Forest. I'd say the Shiv Valley is a T2 because it is close to Aldraxia and it is a lot cheaper than Thornwood Forest. As for the Thornwood Forest, I'm going to put it at T3 because it is basically a straight downgrade compared to Shiv Valley. However, depending on the future market, these 2 nodes can both jump to T1. If, for example, the new Oldita crate is released in the future and it is a new viable crate to make like the Kelfion crate. But for now, I'm probably just gonna take the Shiv Valley one. Next up, we have the 2 nickel nodes. Nickel is a new ore introduced to the game, and it is currently also rising in price due to it being new. But right now, I don't see any reason for it to be a decent long-term material, but who knows. Now, both of the nodes cost 5 CP, and that alone makes them extremely unlikely to ever make it to T1 node in my book. But after some testing, it is actually sitting at T3 just as I expected. Here we compare nickel node with vanadium and titanium nodes because they are similar in price at the time of making this video. And they also require similar amount of time per run. The Valencia ore are currently still sitting at T1 for reference. Nickel node in comparison are more CP expensive than Valencia ore nodes, which would bump the node down a tier. Valencia ore nodes usually have 2 other types of materials, one of which is a powder of whatever, and the other one is either a blue crystal or a violet crystal, which actually sells for quite a bit. In comparison, one of the nickel nodes has Powder of Darkness. That's it. The other one is even worse. It gives you Mithril. This thing has one of the lowest production rate out of all collectible node materials. Yes, it is even lower than the traces in excavation nodes. Even though it sells for max price at 40k each, the production rate is way too low for it to be worth it. I've mentioned this on my previous node video when I was testing the Grana Mithril nodes. And so it drops down to another tier to T3. I actually had my hopes up wishing this nickel node would actually give me a decent mithril drop rate. But for now, I'm putting my CP into something else. Maybe if the nickel ore itself is consistently selling at around 5 to 6k or more, then I think it'll be a decent T2 node to get. Finally, let's look at the food nodes. So first we have the potato and the grape nodes. We do already have these two materials at Velia, so it is not hard to judge their tier. Potato node is a T1 at Velia, so it is a T2 in Olita. As for grapes, it is a T2 at Velia, so it is a T3 in Olita. And the reason for the downgrade is because of the node costs twice as much compared to Velia. Next one down the line is the chicken node. Now this node is actually the closest node in Olita to be a T1 node, and that is how powerful chicken nodes are in this game. But again, because of the cost, it is sitting at T2 instead. And then finally we have the most interesting node in this region in my opinion, the dry fish nodes. Now I've rated all fish node to be a T4 in my previous video. So I was prepared to make an extra tier at tier 5 just for this node because it costs 3 times more than the old fish nodes. But as it turns out, some of these dry fish has actually risen in price quite dramatically. I'm not going to explain how I came to the conclusion because it's a bit more complicated and really boring, so you gotta just trust me on this one. I'm rating it at T4. Yes, that's right, this is the only node that did not get a down tier compared to its counterpart in other regions in my previous video, and it has a chance to become a T3 if the price rises even higher in the future. That also means some of the fish nodes that are close to Port Etheria has gone up in tiers to tier 3 or maybe even a tier 2 now. But I'm not going to officially rate them now because the price is not stable and the long working time of these nodes means it takes a lot longer to have a decently accurate result. Anyways, out of the new Olita nodes, I'm probably going to keep the chicken node, potato node, grape node, and the Shiv Valley Thornwood timber node. And yes, I'm taking CP from somewhere else for these new nodes, so this next section will be a small update of those nodes that I've rated T2 or T1 worthy in the first video, which now has dropped down to a T3 or lower, so you can pull those CP out for the new region. Many of these nodes were sitting at T1 purely because they are bartering material. And that was the time when everyone is trying to make a Karak, so any node gatherable bartering material skyrocketed their price. But now most of the people who are interested in building a Karak don't need those material anymore, so the price has dropped back down as expected. First of all, let's start from the far east side of the map again, Valencia. The node in this region generally has high CP costs, so you're gonna free up a lot of CP from this region. The cactus node has dropped from a T1 straight to a T3. It's not at rock bottom yet, but it's not far from it either. Then we have the Freaka node, which dropped from a T1 to a T2 at the moment. I'd only keep the one near Valencia City if you have the CP, but otherwise I'd free my CP from this node as well. Then we have the Star Anise node. They dropped from a T2 to T3, so this is an easy CP refund. Moving on to Altanova, we have the Ella node, dropping from T1 to a low T2. Once the average price dropped to below 700 or 600-ish, it'll become T3. And then we keep moving on to the Serendia region. The lead node here was a T1 dropping to a low T2 as well, same as the Ella node. The Pine node here is a T3, but I want to mention this node as to why I have it even though it's a T3. And that is because it is a Kazaka node, so having this node will increase the drop rate of the world boss. Or at least that's what the game is telling us. And since Serendia region has a lot of cheap workers, plus the node only costs 1 CP, so it's almost free for me. So I took it. But the other Pine node in Calpheon was a T2, now dropping to a T3. With the Ghost Mushroom also being a T2 or T3 node, I decided to pull the CP out for now, since I can save more CP from node linking if I don't get this node. Finally, we have the Nock node in Kalmaselvia region that I rated as T1 on Lake Flonder, which has dropped to a low T2. The only reason it's not a T3 is because Powder of Earth is a decent material. But if the Nock ore has gotten to where it was last year, which is not even sellable at mint price, then it'll become a T3 node and I would take the CP out. Last thing I want to mention in this video is workers. I've spent about 1 week to get 7 artisan workers and 2 professionals at the time of recording. This is probably considered very fast for some of you, and the secret is not to promote them. I've injected maybe 8,000 plus energy into rolling workers, and I only take the artisans. The reason why I have 2 professional workers is to show you that even if you take the professionals and promote them as fast as you can, it is still way slower than worker rolling. These 2 professionals are the first 2 workers that I got, and I've been leveling them and promoting them as fast as I can. But before I got one of them to level 20 for his first promotion, I already got my 7 other artisans by energy rolling. I totally understand you can be screwed by RNG with this method, which I have been while getting my Altanova and Valencia workers. And this is probably not gonna be possible for newer players because not everyone has 21 characters with 400 energy pool at their disposal. But if you do, then this would most likely be the fastest way you can fill your worker slots with artisans. Anyways, and that's it for today. Subscribe and like the video if it helped. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.